welcome everybody. Very pleased to have such a great audience here today. If you did order food, please go ahead and get it now. It's in the room over there. And very soon I'll be introducing our speakers, Dr. Larry Liu and Dr. Uttam Gaulee. Did I pronounce it all right?
Yeah.
Okay, I should have checked in advance. Yes, good, very good to see you, Dr. Gaulee. See you again.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Hamburger.
They'll be speaking about AI in higher education in one way or another. These events are happening every month over the course of the next year, and the function of the events is to showcase research from faculty affiliated with the Center for Equitable AI and Machine Learning Systems, which is a state-sponsored research center here in Oregon. So if you do research on AI or want to do research on AI, the CEAMLS organization, that's our acronym, CEAMLS, pronounce it CEAMLS, is a great thing to get involved with. And so today you're just going to get a picture of that. And with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Larry Liu.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the kind introduction, Philip, and also thanks to my co-presenter, Dr. Gaulee, on presenting today. So I will take you through a discussion of AI and the crisis of legitimacy in higher education. Then the issue is, okay, well, what is a legitimacy crisis? So we go back to an old term by the famous German sociologist Max Weber, who talks about the belief of the subordinate class that the dominant class has the right to rule, right? So the lower class accepts that the upper class may rule. Now, how does it affect the higher education system? Well, the higher education system is promising people a ticket to the middle class, right? That there would be upward social mobility for people of, let's say, lower social classes. And that if they were to punch the ticket by obtaining a college credential, their entry would be guaranteed. And as long as that belief is strong, we in the higher education system are on very stable pillars. However, there is reason to believe that there is a decline in the legitimacy of the higher education institution. Declining enrollments, declining tuition, and college closures are simply the most, you could say, obvious kinds of events that are happening in higher education that show that there's a challenge to legitimacy. And we've got many, many reasons that I will go over point by point in the coming slides. I will not mention them here. Why this challenge to legitimacy is happening. And I want to simply state outright, because there are so many factors behind those challenges, I am not saying that AI is the main cause of the decline of legitimacy, but should be considered as an additional factor in our research. Okay, so a Gallup poll really shows how important are the colleges. I mean, is the college experience the dark green line that says very important, declining from more than 70%. I mean, I started higher ed in 2011. I'm at the graduate program, and almost everybody said, well, you've got to obtain a college credential coming out of high school. That percentage is continuously declining, as we see here. The higher education researchers have talked about the demographic enrollment cliff, right? Simply the idea that there are fewer kids that are born after the year 2008, a major turning point in the US economy through the great financial recession, after which we see a decline in the young population that was eligible for attending college. We've seen that college inflation has been very high the last 40 years as part of neoliberalization of society. But since the pandemic era, after 2020, we're seeing for the first time now a decline in the average college tuition, and that means that the colleges are reacting to a fall in demand. The ability to fund the colleges depends on the support by the federal government, specifically the loans given out. And so here for the bottom 25% of the households by wealth, we're seeing that the student loan burden is an increasing percentage of the loans that they owe in general. The college wage premium is the difference between the wages of a college graduate and a high school graduate or else. And we see that yes, there has been an increase historically, but then it topped out in the 2000s. And now it's actually slightly on the decline. So there's still an advantage to obtaining a college credential, but certainly not growing anymore. And that could also challenge legitimacy here. The unemployment rate, so the important one is, that's this dark blue line to the left of the graph. So at the high school, they generally suffer from higher unemployment, but that gap seems to be narrowing, which means that for those that'll be on the right side, the red line. So if it gets closer to zero, it means that there's almost no difference between high school and college unemployment. And so then again, people are saying, well, am I much safer by obtaining a college credential? Employers are becoming less likely to include college degree requirements within the job postings. This is data produced by Indeed, which is one of the major employment vacancy platforms. That trend, is also quite recent with a noticeable decline. There are other, challenges to legitimacy beyond just the decision of young kids to not attend college. Look, for instance, at the NSF budget cuts that are proposed by the current administration. For us at MSU, the 7th District of Maryland, we are supposed to lose $50 million. And this is not NSF funding, but the net economic impact of the cuts of the NSF funding. So we have to be worried about that. And then, the college closures, where, it comes in phases, so it was actually lowered in the middle of the pandemic, but then now it's coming back up again because there was some loan support that was given to universities during the pandemic that expires. So we're seeing an increase in the college closures. So now onto the topic here for the talk. So how is AI different from the prior educational technologies? So firstly, there's a promise, at least by these AI education developers, that they can tailor the educational experience to the individual student needs. And you will notice it yourself, right? If you didn't understand what the teacher was saying and explaining a concept, you go to ChatGPT and you look up specifically what you need to know. And it might explain it better to you than what the teacher is providing in the general school curriculum. Furthermore, the AI promises real-time feedback and the identification of knowledge gaps, while a teacher who has to go according to the general curriculum has to neglect both high and low ability students if they're in the classroom. There's a promise of the democratization of education, presumably through self-learning, right, with the assistance of those AI tools. which would be more effective, presumably, than classroom learning. Okay, so these sound quite positive. There's a downside to that as well, right? So concern that AI replaces thinking, and then I will cite a study that will show that point on the student assignments, academic writing. That actually contributing to less job satisfaction among teachers. This is what my research of interviewing higher educators shows. And then there's a fast adoption of that technology compared to prior waves of education technologies. I mean, if you think about like whiteboard or calculators, etc. Right, speed of AI adoption in comparison with the internet, and this is indexed in years. And you can see that the internet rollouts, which started in the 1990s, took many, many years in order to reach high levels of penetration. However, the AI usage cleared the 90% threshold after only 2 years, which is very quick. Here, this is the MIT study, Christina et al., where they did brain scans of students doing different tasks. So with the help of LLM, this is the experimental group, then search would be the Google search result, and then brain would mean is a control group. So these are people who don't use any technology to write the assignments. And if you go to the red color, with the brain parts, you can see it's redder. There's more red connections, which means that there's more brain activity that is happening there. And the LLM, we see much less of these brain connections. And indeed, when they did the surveys, they showed that the LLM students also had a very poor recall, right? They just didn't know what outcome that the LLM had produced. Unfortunately, it is not only human beings that get this, let's say, dumbing down experience. There's now been recent research by computer scientists to find that, well, LLMs can get the brain rot too, because if the percentage of the material that is human produced on the internet is decreasing, and then the AI share is increasing, well, by definition, the AI algorithms have to be trained on the synthetic data, right, which is the data that LLM itself came up with. And then in this kind of like self-reinforcing loop, the so-called AI slop, right, the lower quality content is going to be trained into the future iterations of the algorithm. So on the social theory, I'll just go over it very quickly. German philosopher Jürgen Habermas, sociologist, talks about the crisis of legitimacy of modern capitalism, and then that lower legitimacy of the state then of capitalism will then translate to lower legitimacy on the state. And I'm not going to go over too much of that detail, but simply to say that the modern day economies they have increasing trouble to generate sufficient economic growth in order to support you can say the current obligations, pensions and other kinds of expenditures. Then what happens is that the legitimacy of the system declines. The younger people are increasingly becoming discontented, and then and he also discusses then that the education systems also become funded. Now, then this raises the issue of like, well, okay, does the state legitimacy crisis have an impact on the higher education system itself, which is not directly theorized? So Right, so we see that there's much more of a zero-sum thinking mentality, particularly among the younger generations, right? So the zero-sum idea is, if I gain, then you must lose, right? The whole, you could say, Trumpian logic works according to that as well, right? So, if the immigrant gets a job, then I don't get a job, and so on and so forth. So that is the idea that is pervading the present-day society. It will have an impact on higher education as well. It's been theorized by Randall Collins, famous sociologist, and he developed the concept in the 1970s of credential inflation, which is the simple idea that the value of a college degree is going to decrease over time because presumably the demand for the college graduates is about constant or only slowly changing, while the incentive for every higher ed institution is to mint more college graduates. The power of the colleges is the social closure, right? So the entry barriers to professional jobs, right, that would require you to show the college credential. The function of the colleges, according to Collins, is not to provide job-relevant job training. Education Keynesianism is the way how he describes the strategies of the governments to increasingly accommodate the population, to shield them from structural unemployment in the broader labor market by enrolling them into the higher education system. Now, is that a panacea, that education Keynesianism approach? It is not, because there is a problem of overeducating young people. I mean, we know that from some of the sociological studies that the Arab Spring, a major uprising, was led by unemployed engineering graduates, essentially people who were promised by the governments that they would have secure jobs upon finishing their degree, and didn't get it. Also, colleges are facing increasing budget constraints. So, all of the issues that I mentioned in the slides before. There's internal austerity, right? The rise of adjunct labor within higher education, the ending of tenure in some institutions, we increasingly see. That lowers the stakeholder legitimacy, which is another way of saying, faculty would be quite unhappy with those trends. And of course, that impacts the ability to provide good education experience to students.
3 minutes.
Yes, almost close to the end. And so with all of these budgetary pressures and legitimacy pressures, it stands to reason that many of the higher education institutions will turn to cheaper AI solutions, but it comes with the risk of not having the social closure functions. Okay, so this will be the last slide. What are the potential college futures given this legitimacy crisis? So firstly, we have to state that the era of unrestrained educational expansion is probably over. If you have a smaller college environment, there's going to be a stratification within the higher education system where, basically the elite universities continue to sell the in-person college experience because, the social elites have to mingle with each other and take advantage of networking opportunities. This might apply less so for lower ranking institutions where, the general public might not, want to go through the expense and the effort of higher education. We're going to have to reinvent ourselves. So, the short term, what I guess is happening and will happen is we're seeing more of these AI literacy programs, right, where we even the non-AI related majors, I mean, we'll say, well, we'll teach you how to use the AI for the future-ready workforce, the fancy consulting term that you read in all the consulting reports on the future of work. Shorter credentials, adult education, which in our program we are increasingly focusing on the lifelong learning idea. The irony point is that, well, if AI takes more and more jobs away from regular people, and we have rising technological unemployment, could it actually make our institutions more attractive, right? I mean, we're seeing a record enrollment for law schools and people taking LSAT, right, which indicated a recession. But I would still say that even those short-term solutions on behalf of higher education are still dependent on the overall state of the economy, state support, like the McKinsey Scott donations we saw recently. And I want to conclude with a statement of ethics. Should higher education be only for intellectuals, right? People who love to study, or for the general public? It might be the case that with AI, this ethical question is going to be posed with much more seriousness and intensity. Thank you very much.
The transition is pretty seamless here, but we will take questions in the last 20 minutes of our time together. You have 20 minutes, Dr. Gaulee, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's give a big round of applause again.
Dr. Kelly, you might need to speak into the microphone.
Into the
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, okay. Here? Yeah. Oh, nice. Feels better too. And thank you, Dr. Honenberger, for bringing us all together. And we give a big round of applause for CEAMLS people to bring equity and ethics in AI and higher education. Dr. Liu painted a large picture of what's going on around the world, and a big question, like, is higher education still legitimate, right? And why on earth would you be listening to your professor? Because you may feel like, well, he may have produced these slides by using AI anyway, right? And I have AI tools too. So what's the reason for me to endure through Dr. Gaulee's presentation? Great question, right? And you will be right. I did use AI to produce my slides. But it's an honor to tell you a story that started right here at Morgan State University. Okay, it is a story of curiosity, courage, and community in the granular level. So we're here to talk about artificial intelligence, the thing that is shaping classrooms, conversations, and careers. In fact, is also shaping us. And it's not just the story of technology. It's a story of equity, access, and agency. So let's start with the big question that we have. We try to understand how our students here in this HBCU are using and understanding AI. So this was a study, which was actually carried out by the digital navigators. Some of you are here. Can we give a big round of applause to the digital navigators? So we have an audience, maybe some online, who have contributed to this study. I happen to be the principal investigator of this project. So it was a qualitative study with 28 undergraduate and grad students. And they conducted some semi-structured interviews guided by a comprehensive 4-dimensional framework. The guiding framework, we try to see on these 4 aspects. First of all, let's see what the conceptual understanding is. What knowledge of AI systems and concepts our students have, and how they are applying ability to effectively use AI tools, and ethical awareness, whether there is a recognition of issues like bias, privacy, and integrity, and finally, critical reflection. Dr. Liu also pointed out some of these things may be the ongoing issue with the advent of AI. So in the first and second dimensions, we try to understand how students see and use artificial intelligence. So the understanding piece gives us a clue that they see AI as an everyday assistant. Students defined AI pragmatically as a time-saving, supportive tool. And the challenge? Many demonstrated a shallow technical grasp, relying on simplified analyses and admitting they didn't really know the back end. And here's a quote: AI is like an assistant. It helps you get things done faster. But then, on the ethical aspect, there were emerging concerns. Persistent worries about plagiarism, data privacy. One of the students said, what happens to the data we give to these tools? And we heard an urgency of need, a strong, consistent call for institutional guidance. We don't really have an official guidance, we're just guessing. One student said, anonymized. So equity and access gaps were also pointed out. AI literacy is viewed as an issue of social justice. Some of us pay for subscriptions, while others can't. That creates inequality. One student remarked. So we already see that the very digital gap, the very access gap that we're trying to address is likely to be even more widened. So if it is again going to be the story of rich and poor, do you have to be born within a certain zip code or within a certain income bracket to have access to artificial intelligence? Then it's probably going to be a travesty, right? As philosophers say. So to bring it all together, the student narratives showed us 3 critical tensions. First, quintessential tension was convenience versus critical thinking. So AI is assisting you. Is it also assisting you in deeper learning? Is it also helping you in thinking? Or, as Dr. Lu gave us the brain scan, is it only giving you the brain rot? Is there more brain activity or less brain activity? It's a very important question. And equally important is the issue of access versus equity. So when tools are unevenly distributed, who gets left behind? 33% of families within Morgan State University, where we claim ourselves to be an anchor institution, they're relying on the best device that they have is a smartphone, not even a computer. And that's true with many students seeking a college degree. So that's where we came to play, and we addressed that need with the help of NTIA grant. We distributed 850 laptops, and we'll hear the story of what happened. But then there is also a tension of autonomy versus guidance. So when you are by yourself, you're free to use whatever you have, right? That's autonomy. But where is the map? That is the question. If we can use the machine, what is a responsible way of using? What is the policy? That's where we saw the tensions. Therefore, from our research, we have an institutional implication. That is, we need guidance and pedagogy. So there was a mandate. What is it? Prioritize coherent guidance. Students are just guessing at the rules due to inconsistent faculty expectations. So maybe in one class, one faculty has one standard, maybe someone is saying like completely against AI, others are maybe giving you a different kind of rule, but is there one consistent policy? Probably not. Therefore, the students seem to be utterly confused, and it's not their fault, right? It is out there. So definitely we came to see some action steps recommended. Integrate ethical reflection. AI literacy must be embedded across the curriculum, not just as an optional add-on. So if we make it optional, what happens? Do people do things that are optional? A large majority may be left behind, right? Therefore, implementation of clear guidelines and mandatory introductory sessions are recommended. And another major recommendation was please treat AI literacy as a foundational skill for academic and scholarly use. So we have assumption, but a lot of people out there, can you show us how to use AI? And our digital navigators did that in the community, right? So when I hear, can somebody show me how to use AI? I am confused. But everybody is using it. What are we talking about? Right? But then maybe the issue of legitimacy comes. Right? They believe that there is a certain circle of people who have the legitimacy, who can show us how to use it, or we cannot maybe use it on our own. So maybe they need to be ushered in, welcomed in, invited to not just sit together, but to dance together, that is the issue of equity. Right? So Our mission as anchor institution, I think I gave you away the idea of what we've been doing through the digital navigators, through the grant that came from NTIA. The project is called Metatones, and we deployed MSU, Morgan State University students as digital navigators to mentor K through 8 underserved Baltimore communities, particularly in Ben Lucy and Wilson Park neighborhoods. So our students went to schools, distributed devices, and worked with them to induct them, initiate them to be comfortable with digital access, not only digital access, but also comfort in using AI and also awareness on the potential dangers, for example, phishing attempts. So that came out, therefore, the initiative has lived up to its promise, I would say, promise of Morgan State University to serve as an anchor institution. And the attempt to address this structural solution by distributing devices and broadband. So unintended benefit was the transformation of the digital navigators themselves. Because the digital navigators were deployed to empower the community, they learned a lot themselves from the community. So critical skill development. So they moved from functional use to seeing AI as a critical tool. Critical is the key. So they learned to use prompt engineering because they were not just using it for themselves, but they're using it, that they have to show it how community members can come to the solutions of the problems that are facing them. So therefore, and awareness that every response that an AI tool generates may not be foolproof, right? That awareness. And students felt confident because they learned to take responsibility, how to manage sessions with a child with ADHD or supervising peers. And it was a catalyst for self-efficacy. And these digital navigators are right here, nodding, and you feel free to chime in at some point. But as reported by you, you had an awareness of recognizing your role, providing equitable access that prevents students from falling behind. So here's one quote from one of the digital navigators that say, even my family noticed how I was able to explain what I was learning in everyday terms. So not just in academic terms, but also in everyday terms. So community outcomes were amazing. Bridging the divide, transformative outcomes for Baltimore families. Response showed 96% satisfaction rate. Digital confidence, AI integration, children learn to use ChatGPT for problem solving and checking math answers. Not only doing assignment, but also learning, checking as guideposts. Academic gains and critical awareness. Parents reported aha moments on online safety. For example, they learn not to click on something that is unknown. So these things are really something to be proud of. And one more round of applause to all of our digital educators. Huge challenges. So what you are doing is probably establishing the legitimacy of Morgan State University here as anchor institution. Kudos to you. 10 minutes, I'm almost done. So definitely need for structural investment, maybe more devices, more access opportunities, and also extended program duration because our resources were not enough to sustain, and there is more need in the community. And community-rooted design, something that was suggested as a future strategy, because AI literacy as a foundational civic and equity competency for all, ensuring access translates into agency. So this should be a tool solving their problems. They should not be the ones following where technology is going. Rather, technology should be assisting to solve the problems that they are facing. To conclude, it's a foundational right for all. That's what we are advocating for. And our goal is to foster a generation of learners who are prepared not just to use AI, but to challenge it, shape it, and lead its future. That's the Morgan way. Thank you very much. From the school, as you can see, the device distribution, there are some Morgan students, faculty, and community leaders, and they are saying thank you to Morgan State University. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Liu and Dr. Gaulee. Don't go too far away from the podium. We're going to do a Q&A now. And so what I'd like to ask you to do for the benefit of our viewers on Zoom and for the recording of this event is if you have a question, I invite you to come up and ask your question directly here for everybody, and then our speakers can respond. Questions are open for either speaker or both. Does anyone have a question? Come on up.
Come on up.
Yeah, just come on up, baby. Yeah. Any other questions? We'll get people in a queue. All right. Please just introduce yourself briefly and then ask your question.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Rico. I just had a quick question on the slide 11. A little bit more explanation on the community road design, if you don't mind, please.
All right, you can explain it. You don't have to explain it. You did the research.
Yeah, but I want you to explain more so that all.
Community design?
Yeah.
Into the microphone if you
Okay.
like.
Yeah, I think I did take some time on that, but that's definitely confusing, and I thank Ricky for challenging me to talk about it. Again, like when we think of problems, we think of the people who are already well off, right? People who have already gone to college, people who have already, accumulated wealth, and they have their own worldview. But the idea here, community-rooted design, is when AI is designed, for example, who was the first person to maybe people who designed, who made the algorithm, right? They probably had no idea what people in Baltimore are thinking, right? Or what people from diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures are thinking. They are still building it. So the AI is still learning, right? So it is not perfect. So therefore, our challenge is to listen, to not forget to the marginalized people, to not always generate an answer that is maybe acceptable to one group of people only. Let's say just white people only. So be culturally sensitive. Okay, and community rooted. I think that was the idea that came from you. Yes, Ricky? Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please come up.
Out of curiosity, and does AI use like morality to in answering questions? I asked because I recently asked a question to AI. I've been working with IQ topics, and there were some controversial figures that had high IQ, but the controversial would be their choice of professions. And I remember that I typed it as neutral as I could, but then AI gave me like moralistic that do not judge people for age. So is there something like installed in programs for it to give answers like that?
Into the microphone.
Yes, I mean.
Was that a question to me? Professor Dahl, thank you. Yes, well, I think the intention behind building AI is good, right? But nobody is perfect. So different cultural perspectives are being incorporated, that's good news. So were you happy with the answer or did it concern you?
No, I liked it, but
You're happy. So that means, yeah, someone who thinks like a professor had the input, right? Or he could have been offended, right? Sometimes AI gives you false information, sometimes stereotypical information. Sometimes it may be divisive, controversial. But how you address these things is an ongoing issue, equity issue. So that's the idea that we have to think in a democratic society. So democratization of access of artificial intelligence is a big question, right, in public, and I appreciate Professor for bringing that. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. I'll take the opportunity to ask a question of our first speaker, since he hasn't received any questions yet. So really appreciated the overview, so many different data points leading to this thesis of a crisis of legitimacy in higher education. If I can challenge you to kind of, I don't know, make that into kind of a coherent story for us. In other words, so I sort of see at least two major sources of legitimacy crisis, perhaps. One of them is AI. One of them is this failure of higher education to function as a ladder to the middle class. And also like an increasing failure in that function. Is one of them, how are those related? I mean, are they just independent factors? Is one of them kind of supporting or speeding along the process of the other? Are there other factors that are more pivotal? Are there particular time ranges that you see as like the major inflection points, the major onset of the crisis? Crisis is a strong word, you know, and so it kind of implies there's a crucial decision to be made at a time. And so just like a crisis, for me, it's like 50 years is sort of too long a time span to have a crisis, right? There has to be some inflection point, some real pressure, some immediate pressure. So I'm challenging you a little bit on the crisis thesis and on the coherence of the thesis that there's a crisis. What would you say?
Right, so on the question of like, how serious is the crisis? I think, you know, that is subject to debate. You know, I don't think that, you know, I have the, you know, final answer on that. However, I think that, and also, you know, I showed these long-term data points where, you know, like demography, I mean, these are really like how many kids are being born. I mean, these are really long-term trends. And then in terms of the, you know, the waiving of the college degree requirements, I mean, this is also a process that will be laid out over multiple years. And also like the rate of college closures, I mean, depends really on, you know, every higher education institution and what kind of niche that they have in the overall higher education market. I mean, I sort of make a broad kind of a historical analysis where, based on these multiple data points to say that these, challenges to higher education exist. But it is a fair question. I mean, like the loss of like the faith in punching the middle class ticket. I think that's certainly something that we would have to see being rolled out over long periods of time. I mean, and what's confusing about macro micro is that for each individual high school graduate deciding on like should I go to college or not, there are unique circumstances that would address why they would or not. But I mean, like what I describe is really sort of like a macro structural trend of over time. Are we seeing that young people lose the faith in higher ed? And well, with the Gallup polls, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty clear that this is happening. So, sorry, no clear answer, but that's the nature of social theory.
Thank you for that.
Can I ask Larry a question?
Yes, it's a good question from our speaker. And could we see, because we do have probably another, since we started 5 minutes late, we probably have another 10 minutes for Q&A. Then we'll officially close the event. Is there anyone else who has a question? Perhaps someone who hasn't asked a question yet? Okay, so you're in line. Dr. Gaulee is first, then you. Anybody else has a question? And then the professor can come. No, please, it's okay.
Well, what I really found fascinating in Dr. Liu's presentation was maybe a kind of the irony in like the demographic shifts. As people are out of the workforce, they may think going to college, right, as an option. So colleges and universities may be attracting a lot of people, like a lot of people are out of the workforce, they're fired. Then they go to college. And the college is already in crisis, right? Why is college closing? Because college is not producing the skill that is demanded by the market. The market is firing them and they're coming back to college. So this cycle was very intriguing to me. Do you have more insights on that? Do you want to expand on it?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I mean, Phil and I we're working on a paper about Marxist theories of economic crises, and it seems to be in the nature of capitalism that you require the wage labor in order to generate profits, to generate the surplus value, but then at the same time, in order to continue to generate these profits, you're going to have to automate. You're going to have to cut down on the total number of jobs, and then you can create a crisis of overproduction, right, where you basically produce too many goods that cannot be sold effectively in the market. And you can say that this kind of labor market contradiction that is, you say, endemic to the way how the system works, can similarly be applied, it seems to be, within the higher education system, where you could say that even with these college closures, actually people will come back and they will demand, hey, we want this, like what I would call it, or I guess Collins would call it, educational Keynesianism. The role of the universities not being to provide job market ready skills, but rather an escape valve from the labor market. And what I have not discussed here is that, I mean, unfortunately, I mean, there's other ways how in our country, I mean, we've dealt with increase in unemployment. I mean, for instance, the prison population has substantially increased in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. That was certainly a way to deal with the unemployment crisis. A more benign version to do it, well, early retirement would be the way how the Europeans do it. And a more benign version, I would say, would be to provide education to people. The less benign form of it is if you load them up with student debt and make it non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. So there's a unbenign way to do a benign thing, I would say.
Thank you for that question and answer. Just say who you are briefly and then ask your question.
Hello everyone, my name is Sujata Sharma. My question is for Dr. Liu. I was really fascinated by the EEG, like where they were showing the brain activity. So my questions for you is like, was it showing like people who were using AI versus not using the AI? Was it showing like cognitive decline in that study? If so, then like, what do you think in future that there will be like more cases of Alzheimer's?
Well, I should say, I mean, I've only very briefly read that study. I don't think that they make very strong conclusions regarding, well, you know, you're going to have Alzheimer's, 30 years from now. I mean, my own opinion is not based on any, neurocognitive, neuroscientific research, is that the brain does operate like a muscle, right? So if you are training it regularly, right? I mean, if you lift lots of weights, you're going to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger at the end, right? So, I mean, or at least as close to it as possible. And then vice versa, the logic applies too, right? Where old people that are falling down in the shower oftentimes is associated with weak bones and weak muscle structures as well. That doesn't allow them to stand up upright. And I think for us as higher educators, I mean, this is another severe crisis besides the macro level. Can we keep our doors open? Which is if our students are going into the classroom, do they actually learn what we're expecting them to learn? And I think, I mean, we as educators, I mean, we're all being challenged to try to sell the vision to the kids that, if you write the essay yourself, if you do the thinking process yourself and only use AI as an enhancement tool rather than as a replacement for thinking tool, you're going to have a much happier life, this will be much better for you.
Thanks for that. So we do have time for one last question, and then we'll wrap up the session.
Yes, I have a question. Dr. Philip Zimbardo from Stanford University and the Stanford Experiment, he wrote a book called The Demise of Guys. Basically what he says is that he shows evidence how, like in college education, there is gradually less males are pursuing higher education and more females are, which used to be the opposite. Some decades ago, more women, less women used to study medicine, let's say. Now medicine classrooms are packed with women and men are the minority. Does a similar pattern has been observed with AI? Let's say more females use AI than males, or or do females use it more in a more informed manner? Just curious. It's a question I had because you were talking about college education and also the gender issue was in my mind. So if you know or could speak to that, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I've not read a lot of studies that specifically talk about AI and gender. I mean, I think there might have been one consulting report where I saw that the take-up of AI would be higher for males than for females. And I think, part of the reason is, you could say this idea of like tinkering with gadgets and technologies. The males would tend to be more confident in that, in doing like tinkering. Now, in terms of how they're using it, so I mean, is that different across sexes? I've not found any studies that say that.
Please join me in thanking our speakers once again for